And finally, the conclusion. So you watch this bazillion minutes, you ask all of this question to your photographer or videographer, you get all these answers. And why do you actually do that? What do you want to find out? Well, the most important thing you want to find out is who's in front of you. What is the vision of this person? Is he after a couple of nice shots for his portfolio? Is he after money, or he is after satisfaction of the client? What is his prime vision? You cannot really chase everything. You have to have one single focus and you have to follow it. So you want to understand who is in front of you, where is your money goes, and what are you going to get at the end. And from my experience, by asking all of these questions or part of them, you don't have to ask all of them, you'll get your answer. You'll get very clear picture who is in front of you. You'll see lots of articles with the topics like question to ask your wedding photographer or something similar. The problem with these articles that most of them are not written by a photographer, and therefore they're not going to give you any definitive information. They will just make you more confused, your photographer more confused, and overall going to create awkward situation really. This video will not only give you the right questions to ask, this video will explain you why these questions are necessary. How do I know that? Well, in the past 10 years or so, I did over 500 weddings myself, and with all of my couples I meet personally, that's roughly about 50 meetings per year, and I heard all of these questions pretty much from the same source, like the knot on the wedding wire, something like that. I answer all of them, and I know what is important and what's not. One more thing before we started. Besides an interview and thoughtful question that you're about to ask your photographer, the goal overall is to establish a good connection with the person. Your photographer would be the closest person on the wedding day you have a contact with out of all the vendors. Even out of the entire family, you would spend lots of time with this person. That is actually why it is important to hear not only the answer, but the way they are sent it towards you, basically. That's why I do engagement photo shoots for all of my couples before the wedding, just to know each other, just to hang out for some time. There's lots of questions I prepare for you, and it might be hard to digest all of them. That's why I decided to break them into the group. There is a basic questions about overall the process of the wedding photography or wedding day. There's a question about the packages, about the payments. There is questions about what's going on the wedding day, what's going on after the wedding day, how do you receive all of the picture and things like that. It's a lot of information, but hey, you're about to make a very important decision, and I think this extra 10 minutes would only benefit you with this decision, and you would know lots of new information about overall wedding process, what your photographer would do on the wedding day. This extra 10 minutes would save you lots of time in the future and lots of money as well. If you want to make some notes, you actually don't have to. I will link my article about this topic in the description, and you can just go there and pick the question that you are most interested, or just to print the whole thing. Let's start with the basic, and probably with the most common question I personally get asked, and my colleagues as well. And that is, describe your shooting style, describe your editing style. And this question is all over the internet, that's why it was get asked. It doesn't really make sense to ask this question because you're gonna get a very basic answer to this based on the current trend. For example, right now it's a rustic style, and 3 or 5 years ago it was photojournalistic style. If you cannot see the style of the photographer based on his picture that on his website, it's probably not that important for you anyway, so it's not very important to ask. An example here, like if you're looking at someone's painting, you're not asking the painter what is his style. It's pretty obvious from the painting itself. What's better question to ask is to ask photographer to show his entire gallery, better 2 or 3 of the galleries from the wedding, where you can see the entire wedding day, like 1,000 pictures. And the reason being is any photographer can pick 20 or 30 best pictures from the wedding day. But that's not how many you want to see in your album or overall from your wedding day. You want to see everything. And you want to judge by this picture how well he handles the difficult lighting situation, how quick he is with his decision go from one place to another, what he's actually doing overall through the day. Can he get all of the detail shots? Can he get all the group shots? Is his second shooter where he should be, and so forth. This information would be much more valuable, and it's much more comfortable for your photographer to answer this as well. The very important question is how many weddings have you done? What is your experience overall? Because you don't really want to have someone who's actually did 5, 6 weddings or so. And many people would ask, like, what is the difference between a photographer who did 30, 40 weddings, who's actually just finished his first season, and someone who's done like 300, 400 weddings, who's in the market for like 5, 6 years. There is a difference. The difference is that photographers who did 300 or 400 weddings, he's much more stress resistant. There is nothing that can surprise him on a wedding day or after. The other big advantage that he's actually seen his work 10 years ago from now. And he know how to make them timeless. He know the secret how to make this picture last forever, basically. And the wedding is a classic event, and you don't want it to look like a fiction movie from like 80s or something like that. You want them to be as close to the classic as possible. You don't want someone who's actually experimenting on your wedding day with different angles and new things here and there. Of course, the quality of the actual image of the JPEG image or whatever would be better 20 years from now, but the actual basic composition, if it's done right, it's going to be timeless. The other thing, someone who's actually did, again, 300 or 400 weddings, they went through everything. They lost footage. They had pretty weird situation on the wedding days and after the wedding days. They prepare for all of that. They doing triple backups. They have backup cameras and batteries and lights and everything. They had a photographer. They had a second shooters who wasn't on the wedding on time. They know all the things. They went through everything, and they know how to prevent it and how to act if something like that would happen. So you basically paying for this experience as well. It's sort of your insurance. Of course, you need to choose your photographer based on your budget. But if your budget allow you to hire more experienced person, as with pretty much everything in all the fields, go with a more experienced person. Another very common question, what is your favorite part of the wedding day? And honestly, this question is not very important. You're not going to get any additional valuable information from your wedding photographer by asking that. I personally do not have a preferable wedding part. What I do like, I like to capture candid moments. And throughout the years, I developed a couple of tricks here and there that help me to create these moments, because if you just wait for this, it's not going to happen. As a photographer, you have to direct sometimes, you have to organize things, and that's part of your duty. You have to be in full control of the situation overall. And sometimes you have to say, like, okay guys, after the ceremony we're walking down the aisle, and please do not look down, look at your guest and look at each other. When you get to the middle, please hold your hands in the air, and at the end stop and kiss, because lots of people would forget about it. You just finish your ceremony, you're just gonna walk down the aisle trying not to step on the dress. You see like 3-4 cameras in front of you, you see lots of guests around. You're just gonna be confused. You need some sort of direction, you need some sort of help. Same thing would happen on a getting ready process. Like if I'm not going to direct my bride and the groom and their bridesmaids to do some sort of things, they're not going to happen. But I need this moment. What I can do, I can bring them into one place and ask to do some sort of things that are actually helpful for the bride or for the groom, and also naturally creates very cool moments that I can capture. At the same time, you cannot just go from one point to another. You have to look at your client, look at the person who actually hired you to make days special and easy to go. And you have to figure out, are you pushing too much? Is it too much for them? Because your client not a professional model who signed to work for 8 hours or 10 hours, right? You need to do some sort of things, then step back, give some room to breathe, and do the second thing. At the same time, if your client comfortable with that, and some people would be much more comfortable if you direct them all the time, then go for it. There is no single recipe, so you just have to feel it. Why I'm keep saying you have to feel it? Because no one would tell you that directly in words. You really have to read the face of your client and see what is more comfortable for this person, and you want to stay on this edge of delivering the best pictures possible, and at the same time not to make your client nervous more than this person would want to. Very common question I got asked, what equipment do you use? I would say that's not a very important question as well, unless you know what you're asking about. If you're very good in photography and videography equipment overall, if you're working with the light, let's say you're working in the movie productions, or you are a photographer yourself, then yes, it's important. At the same time, if you like the photographer's work, if this quality is good enough, then it doesn't really matter what equipment he's using. And we pretty much all using the same equipment. I mean, the same class of equipment, whether it's a Canon, Nikon, or Sony, or whatever. What you want to ask is how familiar your photographer with the light, what he's going to do in a hard situation, let's say in a barn where you cannot reflect the light or anything. Is he familiar with the strobe light? Is he familiar with the video light, like this one, for example, I'm using right now? Does he even have it, this type of light? Because your basic camera flash not going to be enough in a certain situation. So you want to know that, and it's actually interesting. I'm likely to live here in LA, and every time I'm walking next to the movie sets, I'm looking at all of these trailers, and they usually have the very little amount of the actual cameras, actual recording gear, and all of these trailers filled with the lighting equipment. Because when we photograph things, when we do the videography clips, we are working with the light. We're working with the light reflecting from the object. So the light overall is way more important than the equipment. the way you work with the light. I personally prefer to work with the natural light. That's why I'm always involved in building the perfect timeline, and I always do care about the sunset pictures because it's extremely important for me what I'm working with. Another very common question is, do you shoot digital, film, and if digital, what do you use, JPEG or RAW footage, and what resolution photos we will receive? Well, the first part of the question is actually less important than the second, and let me explain you why. It's nowadays very trendy to shoot film, and lots of photographers would tell you that. But I'm pretty sure most of the photographer would not risk to shoot very significant amount of wedding on film. And the reason is you can easily lose your footage. You can lose it while you're loading film, while you're unloading film, while you're developing the actual film. And in terms of the file format, well, the experienced photographer without any question would shoot RAW format. For the Nikon user, it's a NEF format, because it's then you're gonna have much more space to work with the light, with the sharpness and the rest of the things. Someone who would shoot JPEGs, they are quite unaffordable photographers who are just starting and who don't want to deal with JPEGs. By the affordable, I mean they cost like less than $1,000 per day for the entire day with everything. The film photography, though, has very interesting advantage. It's not very obvious for the client, but it's very interesting one, and it has nothing to do with the quality picture or with the magic glow or the light player or something like that. When you have a film camera, you have to walk your shot. You know that each click would cost you like $1 or so with developing. And if you're shooting medium format camera, it's like $2 per click, like $2, $2, $2. So each time you would walk around, you would try to find the best background, the best place to place the couple, the best lighting. You're gonna try to figure out the best time of the day to do that. And the surprising thing, when you actually put everything together, when you actually think through the process before you make this one click, you can stay there at the same time and do the digital shot with the camera. I actually did that many times. I had my Hasselblad with, I forgot what the film was. I think it's like a basic Canon medium format. And I had Nikon D800. And I shot at the same time at the same place. And after editing both, you would not see the difference at all. The difference is in the time invested while you're making this shot, while you actually walk into this place. This film camera would make you think way more and deeper in terms of your shot. And so it's not about the quality, it's not about some sort of magic or something like that. It's just with the film camera, you can stop for a second, take your break, breathe, think about what you want to do. And before you invest in this click, you think everything through. The more important question, though, is what kind of files are you going to receive? And that's due to some of the photographers. I personally never met one, but I've heard a lot from my clients that lots of photographers would deliver very low resolution files, sometimes with a watermark, and their packages, let's say, include like 100 or 200 pictures in a full resolution, and for the rest of them you have to pay. It's a very uninspected thing, and it can cost you quite a lot, so you want to avoid that in any cost. I think it's completely a wrong way of doing business, and I'm hearing about it less and less, probably because these photographers went out of business or they just changed the way they work with their client. But anyway, you don't want to get into a situation where you're gonna get low resolution files with the watermarks all over them. You paid for these pictures and you want to get everything. And I think if you want to have raw footage, you have the right to get it as well. So you have to ask your photographer and you want to see his reaction, how flexible he is with that. Any photographer should understand that you're going to use them for personal things. You're not going to do the huge billboard in Beverly Hills or something like that. You're using these pictures for personal things. You want to print them when you want to do the album if you want to do wherever you want, really. You paid for them and you want to get the full thing. Do you have an assistant? Do you have a second shooter? And how is your responsibilities divided? And that's a very important part as well. For example, in my case, it depends on the package the couple would choose. And let's say this is less than 10-hour package. It's like 4 or 6 hours package. In this case, I don't need a second shooter, really. In this case, we're talking about very intimate, small weddings where we have 30, 40 people and I can easily cover this entire group. But let's say if we're talking about 8 or 10-hour package, which is the most common one. In this case, I need the second shooter to do the getting ready shots and all of the things during the ceremony. Or let's say we're talking about the weddings that goes for 14 hours and more. Well, in this case, we're talking about the big Indian, Armenian weddings with 500 people or more. And it's just simply impossible to cover the entire reception with just the 2 photographers. In this case, we need 3 shooters. And in this case, we have the getting ready in different places. We have the ceremony at the church where you cannot walk from one place to another easily, so you have to place each photographer in a different location. Again, we're talking about the wedding party photos, and in order to make them fast, you need to divide your responsibilities as well between the guys and the girls. And to cover the entire family, you want to have 2 photographers who's doing that. So again, it depends on the overall size of the wedding, on the amount of the guests on your wedding. It's based on that. Now we got to the fun part. We just finished with the basic question. Now we get to the packages and payment and prices. First of all, you need to know what is included and not included in the package. It's usually written in a client agreement, but if you find that something important that is not mentioned in the agreement, for example, the resolution of the photos you're about to receive that we just talked about, don't be shy and write it down with your hand or make a comment in an electronic form. During the conversation with your photographer, you'll get the idea if he is flexible enough to meet your needs and expectation or not. And you don't want someone who doesn't move left or right. You want someone who can be flexible with you, because sometimes you can sign the contract and let's say closer to the wedding, you figure out that you want to add or exchange some sort of things, and you want to see the person in front of you who's easily gonna make this change. I think it's a very important question to ask. Can we exclude anything from the packages if we don't really need it? For example, in my packages, there is an option to customize pretty much everything you want, to remove some sort of services or to add it. At the same time, in the last 5 years or so, I figured out the packages that 95% of the time would make happy most of my clients. Still, if necessarily, I would be happy to customize them. And again, with this question, you're not really asking about the packages itself, you're just trying to figure out how flexible your photographer is. Because you cannot predict absolutely everything. The few things would change here and there, and you want to make sure that the photographer would make these changes without any hustle and very quick. You don't want to spend your nerves on that. And when you're choosing the package or you customize the package, you want to ask what's going to happen if your event going to last longer, and if your photographer can actually stay longer, and how much is going to cost. Because not all photographers willing to stay extra time, and if they will, you want to make sure that it's reasonably affordable. In my case, for example, last year it was about $280 for 2 photographers, 4 hour. The only one thing that I have to warn you over here, that you have to make this announced very loud and clear. You want to make sure that your photographer got your message that he's going to stay for a certain amount of time. Let's say you're asking him to stay for additional extra hour or 2 hours, and he's not going to stay there for 3 or 4 hours and then going to send you the bill after that. Me personally, I'm always asking my wedding planner. I don't want to disturb my couple too much. I'm going to the wedding planner and ask if they want me to stay extra time, because there was the weddings where I stayed for additional 5 hours, 6 hours, but that's pretty rare. Usually it's another hour or 2 hours, because one of the most common packages, like 8-hour package, usually though we upgrading to the 10-hour package like a couple of months before the wedding, but that's probably another story for another video. But anyway, there are some couples who's trying to fit everything in 8 hours, and usually by the end of the day they want to add one more because they don't want the photographer to miss the cake cutting, for example, or the garter toast or something like that. Over here you want to make sure that your photographer would stay additional hour, not 2 hours. And I'm emphasizing that because it's a very common thing, and many couples got unpleasantly surprised with that, and you don't want to be one of them. Let's come back to our favorite type of the questions that shouldn't be really asked, because they're not going to give you any information. And this is how far in advance do I need to book you for my wedding? And why it doesn't make sense to ask this question. Let's say you come to the meeting, right? Let's say at noon to the Starbucks, and you're sitting with a photographer. You went through the packages and everything. The meeting is over, you went back home, and someone called the photographer and asked for this specific day. It's very rare, but it did happen. And they ready to send the deposit via Venmo or something like that right away. That's pretty much it. The day is lost. And the thing is, on average, I calculated it on average 2 years ago. I just grab all of my contract, all of my agreements, and I count the days from the time we met, from the time we actually signed the contract to the day of the wedding. On average, I have 13 months. Probably right now it's a little bit shorter, but on average it's 13 months. And you might think that, okay, if we meeting like year and a half before our wedding, I have time to look somewhere else. I wouldn't say it's a right strategy. If you like the photographer, you are fine with his prices, then go for it. Book, do not wait, because you might miss the day and you might miss this specific person. At the same time, you have to keep in mind that not all days are equal. For example, if we're talking about September or October, Saturdays of September and October, This one got booked pretty quickly, and if you have one of those days, you don't really want to think too much around. And I'm not really saying like, oh, rush your decision and get whatever is in front of you. Do your research, but at the same time, if you like the specific vendor, if you really want to go with this person, do not hesitate and book this person on the spot. Very important question, and it's actually got asked very rarely. No idea why, but this is what is your deposit? How much money should I pay in advance to actually book you? In my case, it's 30%, but for some vendors, it's 40, 50%, especially for the venue. And you want to know this number in advance. You also want to know what is the payment process? What is the schedule? When do you need to pay another half? And if it's split for 3 parts or something like that. And another important thing to ask is what type of payments this person accept. Is it a PayPal or it's a credit card? It's a check. If it's comfortable for you. And also right away on the spot, you want to ask what is the refund policy. That's very important. For example, in my case, if you cancel your wedding 3 months before the actual day, I would return you the deposit. And some vendors or photographers would not return the deposit at all, and you want to be aware of that. And with the deposits, it's basically two sides of the coin over here. On one side, you have the photographer who's on average booking their client like a year in advance. So even if you cancel your wedding like 3 months before the actual day, he's not gonna get any other client for this day. So he's basically losing one of his Saturdays or Fridays. And we have only 55 of them in a year. So you can imagine the risk. At the same time, and I very rarely seen this situations overall, is where some sort of clients booking few vendors and placing the deposit, and then closer to the actual wedding day, picking the one that they're more comfortable with and trying to get the deposits back. For me personally, I chose here to be as stress-free as possible. So if, let's say, you cancel your wedding 3 months before the actual day, I would be happy to return your deposit. At the same time, when it's happened 10 days before the weddings and I had it only once, I returned the deposit as well and just book a trip to Yosemite National Park to take a break. It's not a really big deal to think about it too much. It's happened only like once in 5 years or so. And I think you should be more on the client side. If something happened, they probably have enough stress not to worry about you, and you want to create as a better experience for your clients as possible, because this way the word gonna spread pretty quick and you're gonna get additional wedding. And what's gonna happen if you're not going to return this deposit? What kind of negative reviews are you going to get, and what overall are you going to get out of this situation? You're going to get some sort of headaches, stressful emails back and forward. Do you really need it? Probably not. You have enough weddings per year and throughout your lifetime overall. Another very little question that is important to ask when you sign the contract is your photographer has the liability insurance. And I'm working with a venue that require liability insurance. They're not gonna let you step to the wedding without it, really. Although it didn't quite work for me when I needed, I accidentally broke the hourglass at one venue in Malibu. I just walk around with a backpack on my back, and I turned and it broke. And when I contacted my insurance company, They said it's not expensive enough, although it was about $300 or so. And they basically told me that I have to destroy like a half of the venue in order to get some sort of payment. But at the same time, you really have to have it, and your photographer have to have it. And why do you want to care about this? Because on the day of your actual wedding, if your photographer doesn't have it, then you might have some questions to solve, and you don't really want to have that. Another very important question to ask, especially if your wedding is outside of LA, for example, is your photographer charging anything for traveling? And I'm going to be based on my example over here. For example, if you're wedding in Lake Tahoe, I'm not going to charge anything for traveling around the California at all. And some photographers or vendors will. And also, if you're doing your wedding outside of LA, if you have a destination wedding, want to ask your photographer what is the travel fee and what is included and what not. Again, based on my personal example, if I'm doing the weddings, let's say somewhere in Florida or New York, usually my couple pay for the ticket and I just stay there. For example, in Florida, I stayed for additional 5 days or so, and my couple just pay for the tickets and I pay for the rest because it's a nice place to be. And if I'm going to the wedding, let's say like I went to Pennsylvania, I have nothing against the Pennsylvania, but I went there for 1 day, took pictures, and went back the same evening. So in this case, I'm going to ask to pay for the ticket and for the hotel as well. So it's always case to case. But you want to make sure what is your additional charges would be if you're wedding outside of the normal working area of the photographer. You want to know this in advance. You don't want to be surprised after that because it might be quite expensive sometimes. And another thing I want to add over here, it's like food for thought. Let's say you are in New York, for example, highly priced area in terms of photography and videography. And the good photographer would cost there about $5,500, $6,000 or so. Same quality photography would cost you about $3,000 here in LA, 2,800, 3,200, somewhere there. So you can fly out this photographer from LA or from any other area pretty much. One of them is right over here in front of you. So you can fly this photographer from LA to New York, save about 40% of its cost because grand total on one side would be about 3,700, and on the other side it would be about $6,000. You're gonna get absolutely the same quality of the pictures. Probably someone who's flew from one place to another would invest more of his time and effort because he need the portfolio from this new location. So it's win-win from both sides, and it does work beautifully if you again staying in a highly priced area. From my experience, that Florida, that's New York, that's Chicago, San Francisco, and a few other places. So consider that as well. And now let's talk about the series of questions that you need to ask your photographer in order for him to do the best job possible. And the first one, sort of obvious, but it's very underestimated from what I can see, and you need to ask your photographer about it. And you need to ask, what does he need exactly to do his job? And usually what he needs from you is the detailed timeline. And what do I mean by the detailed timeline? What needs to be included over there? Unfortunately, quite often I'm getting and my colleagues get in the timelines where you can see when the ceremony going to start, where is the reception starting, and all of the detailed things of the reception, like the first dance, cake cutting, and the rest of the things. What do you actually need in your timeline? First of all, you need the location and time for every stage of the wedding. And what I'm saying here is you need to have the address and the time of the getting ready spots for both for the bride and the groom. Otherwise, after receiving your timeline, the photographer would quickly call you back and ask where his second shooter should start and where his first shooter should start. And I'm guessing it's not going to end with the photographer. Videographer would ask you the same question. The wedding planner would ask you the same question. The caterer and the rest of the team, the rest of the vendors would start asking you the same question, which you can avoid by just putting this information out there. So it should be what you should have in your timeline. You should have the address, you should have the time, and each day of the wedding lineup in this timeline. And it doesn't end just with the getting ready shots. Let's say you have your wedding at multiple locations, not at the same venue, and right after the getting ready, you move into the church for the ceremony. Well, lots of the time in our timelines, we have 2 p.m. church. We need to have the name of it, we need to have the address of it, and what time we're actually going there. We are arriving slightly earlier, slightly before the ceremony. Do we have time to capture the details and what time we're actually leaving from there? Are we taking the group shots at the church, or we're doing them back at the venue? So what are we exactly doing? You should build a timeline in a way that the person who's doesn't know anything about your wedding, who never actually spoke with you, would understand everything, the entire logistic from this piece of paper, from usually 2 or 3 pieces of paper. So it should be very, very detailed. And the other thing, you should avoid the gaps that longer than 30 minutes. Everybody should know what's going to happen each 20-30 minutes of this day. It should be planned very, very carefully. Actually, the thoughtful wedding timeline is the key to the perfect stress-free wedding, and I talked about it in details in my previous video, and I also have the article on my blog. Invest some time and read it through. It's very, very helpful. Actually, making the timeline is the task for the wedding planner, and I don't mean the day of wedding planner that provided with the venue. That's the actual job for the wedding planner who you hired, like, let's say, half a year before your wedding day, and he or she should build the very detailed timeline. Sometimes if I'm seeing that the bride and the groom sending me the timeline that I do not understand, like I do not understand when things going to happen, what do we actually do? We just doing the Skype call or Zoom call, and we go just through each and every detail. I'm asking the question that I do not understand. We're making the marks over here and there. I'm basically rebuilding the timeline with the couple. Sometimes it takes a couple of hours, but it really is worth it, because each and every question that I'm about to ask on the wedding day, and I'm guessing all of the other vendors would ask, eats the time from the actual wedding, and also each question followed by a decision from the bride and the groom, and you'll have to invest the time and energy into this decision. You don't really want to do that. You want to have very detailed instruction that you can pass to the different people, and they would understand what's going to happen, and you don't want to really bother with the question. What I want to say here, overall, I cannot really stress enough how important the timeline is. Another interesting question that usually got asked, have you shot at my venue before? I wouldn't say it's a very important question, and here's the reason why. Any photographer that never shot at this specific venue before, any responsible photographer, he would get there a little bit earlier, let's say like an hour or 2 hours before the wedding, and just walk around and we'll try to figure out where he can do the group shots, where he can do the sunset picture, and what's going on with the light, what's going on with the background, and the rest of the things. The other thing, let's say you shot at this venue in 2018. Would it be different in 2020? Of course it will. Lots of venues rebuilding things, changing things here and there. So it's going to be slightly different, and your experience, it's going to help you insert some ways, but not entirely. So is it really important that the photographers, this specific photographer never shot at your venue before? I wouldn't say it's that important as our client tend to think, actually. And the prime reason for that is because most of the venues sort of similar in terms of the structure. They have the places for the ceremony, they have places for the getting ready, they have places for the reception, and so forth. It just align in a different layouts, I would say. They also similar in terms of style. We have lots of Spanish haciendas, we have lots of modern venue, we have villas, we have vineyards, and so forth and so forth. And we have the golf courses as well. So one hacienda would be similar to another. One golf course would be similar to another. And if your photographer shot at one place, he would be pretty comfortable with the other. Another thing that has to be mentioned, that photographers not only working with physical objects or something like that, with the backgrounds, they also working with the light. And the good photographer, when he gets to the venue, like I said, an hour or 2 hours before the actual wedding, he can just stand there, take a look at the sun. Okay, the sun is right there, and it's going to travel this direction. So around 2 p.m. I'm gonna do the first look right over here at this spot, because the sun gonna be right there and it will create a shade right over here. I'm gonna do the family pictures right over here again, because I have enough, big enough shade to cover everyone. I'm gonna shoot the ceremony from this angle and from this angle, so I need my second shooter to be there. So the experienced photographer would quickly figure out on a new place what he should do. And the third pretty cool thing that we have right now, we have very detailed Google Maps in 3D, so you can actually walk around the venue. And I did actually very cool very cool thing when I shot for the first time in Yosemite National Park. Of course, you're not gonna go there before the actual photo shoot. So what I did, I spent like 3 or 4 hours just walking around on the Google Maps and trying to figure out what places do I want to shoot, because you need to plan everything very carefully there, because to go from one place to another, it takes sometimes like 40 minutes or up to an hour. So you need to have specific points where you can where you want to shoot. Same true for the wedding venue. You can just go there and take a look from the top and figure out what is your timeline, what you're actually going to do and what spots are you going to use. You can also take a look at the previous works that was done at this specific venue. You're not the first one, you're not the last one. Someone shot this venue before you, and you can take a look at these photos and say like, okay, this one great, this one worked, I can repeat that. This one I doesn't quite like this one. I need to understand why he chose to do this picture right over here with this light. Can I do anything better? So we can go and analyze this specific place without any problem. All these three things would give you enough information to work with and not to worry about being the first time at this specific spot. Do you accept must-have photo checklist, or I would say simply a Pinterest board with a collection of photos that the couple like? Usually the bride like the specific shots. Of course, any photographer would accept them. I rarely seen the opposite examples. But here's the trick. You need to know exactly if you have time for this specific shots and if you have the location for this specific shots. Sometimes I receive the photo checklist that it's not really possible to accomplish being in this specific place. Let's say we're shooting somewhere at the mountain in the Big Bear or Tahoe Lake, and I have an example of the picture at the beach. But most importantly, you have to have the space in your timeline to make sure that it's possible to do the specific shots that you want to do. Just to give you a quick example, let's say you have a venue very close to the beach, and logically you want to go to the beach to do some sunset pictures. You need to figure out the time that you're going to spend traveling there. And by that, I mean loading, unloading, parking, walking, everything. You cannot do the guesstimate, like let's say it's going to take 10 minutes to go to the beach. Actually try to figure out how long it's going to take for you to jump in the dress into the car, how long it's going to take to drive there on Saturday, how long it's going to take to park there, and you actually can avoid it by asking someone to just drop you off, how long it's going to take for you in this dress to walk by the sand, what are you going to be actually wearing, are you going to be wearing the flip-flops or something like that. You need to think it through, and better if you can spend some time to just go there. Let's say you went to check out your venue, right? And you have this idea about taking a picture at the beach. Do this actually. Just jump in the car, drive there, and count the time. Count the time from this venue to the actual beach. Try to figure out how long it's going to take a picture there, let's say 15 minutes, and drive back and look at the watch. Usually you would be surprised, and your estimate time would be 4 or 5 times lower, smaller than the actual time. It's very common. I'm not trying to like over scare you or trying to like overcomplicate things. But in order to not be unpleasantly surprised, you need to keep all of these things in mind. And if you feel like you're not quite sure, you can always ask your wedding planner or the photographer. They would honestly tell you like what is exactly possible and what's not. And if some sort of things possible, what do you need to do in order to achieve them? Like what points you need to pass, what checklist you have to mark. And since we start talking about the things that could go wrong and that you should plan very well in order not to do that, we should talk about 2 other things. You should ask your photographer what's going to happen if something would happen with you or with your photographer. Let's start with a photographer. It's really rarely happen, but still, you should need to ask what's going to happen if your photographer gets sick, let's say like a couple of days before the actual wedding. Personally, it's never happened with me, and I never got sick to the point where I cannot go and do the wedding, for example. And since I started doing all of the sporties goodies like a couple of years ago, I got sick the last time like, I don't know, like 3 years ago or so. But still, it's a very important question. What's going to happen? In my case, I have first shooters and I have second shooters who can always go and shoot the wedding instead of me. And my first shooters, they've been second shooters for a couple of years. Then they work with me next to me, and then they start doing my weddings on their own. So they are very experienced guys. And you want to hear the same thing from your photographer that you hire, that he has someone to back him up. And usually the way it works in the industry, like we all in the same community, we all sort of know each other, and there is nothing wrong to ask your colleagues to do your wedding. And you can explain like how do you shoot, how do you work with the light, and all this sort of things. Instead of you. Of course, your photographer going to lose pretty much all the money over here, but it's really not about the money. It's about making your client happy and do your job properly. The other very important question is what's going to happen if something happened with the couple. And I'm not And I do not mean here that you as a couple get sick or something like that. That's usually the other thing. And that's usually happen with the traditional big weddings, Indian weddings, Armenian, Thai weddings. What's usually happened that not everything goes on time the way it planned. And lots of the time, the sunset pictures or the couple pictures, picture of the couples, got sacrificed basically. We just don't have time to do the picture of two of them. And of course, the bride would be upset, very upset actually. And you should make sure that your photographer is willing to do everything to compensate that. So what do we do usually? I don't see any difficulty to ask your makeup artist to do your makeup again a week after or something like that, and just go to the beach or go somewhere else to the park and do proper pictures of two of you. You already have this dress, you already have this suit and the rest of the stuff. All that left is the makeup, one day of your time, and us. Me personally, I'm not going to charge anything additionally. The reason is actually very simple. I really do care about my clients, and they already spent quite a lot on this 14-hour package, and they ordered the books. I'm actually looking at 4 albums that I should deliver to my couple probably today. So with all that, it just doesn't make sense to ask for something else. You just do a favor and they would talk about this favor in the future and they would bring you new clients. That's usually how it works in this community. Again, you want to hear that from your photographer as well. And I'm not saying that all photographers should do the same. They should do free photo shoots after the wedding. Absolutely not. If photographer want to charge for this photo shoot, why not? It's his work. That's his work and it should be appreciated. So it's a choice of each and every photographer. I'm just talking about myself over here. But you want to make sure that there's a backup plan. It's not like if you miss this opportunity, missed forever. No, it's not. Everything is right out there. Like I said, you have absolutely everything to repeat this process and to do this properly. And what you're going to have at the end, you're going to have the very cool story and the very cool picture. And when you actually see this album, you're going to listen and you're not going to see the difference actually between the actual wedding day and the day when we shot when we did the additional shots. They all going to be the same. They just going to look great. And in the big albums, and usually like 14 hours wedding goes with 12 by 12 albums with like 100 pages out there. It's a very good additional photos, and that's the one that are going to be printed on canvas and put on the wall somewhere. So again, it's a very important question to ask, and it's a very important thing to do. And usually videographers absolutely fine with this as well, and especially if they work with the photographers. The trick here is that the videographer would just follow the photographer would do all the job. He going to like direct the couple and do everything. All the videographer need is just to follow the photographer, and that's it. And what he's gonna have at the end, again, he's gonna have the happy couple that going to promote his work to his friends and family, and therefore you're gonna get more clients. And the other thing, you're gonna have much better video at the end that going to go to his portfolio. So it's win-win over here. I hope I answered all of the question in this part, so let's move to the next one. And the next one is actually what question you should ask that related to the days after the wedding. How do you receive photos? What file formats? What retouching process? And the rest of the things. First one is obviously the retouching process. You want to know how you're going to receive your photos, how they're going to be color corrected in retouch. It's a very important question to ask. And let me show you on my example. Let's say we go to the typical like 10-hour wedding, and from both cameras, from my camera and from the second shooter camera, we're gonna have 7,000 pictures. We're going to choose the good ones out of all 7,000. Let's say it's about 1,000 pictures or so. Some of them close-ups, some of them big group shots, and so forth. We only need to retouch the close-up shots, and usually we don't really have to do this. Maybe I'm just lucky, but all of my clients, beautiful people, and they have perfect skin, so they don't really need retouching. Unless the guys decided to shave like the day before the wedding or so, and yeah, that might be a problem. But with the rest of the things, it's usually pretty easy. Obviously, you don't need to retouch the group shots unless you have something on the background. For example, at the Orca Trench, I have a very cool blue handicap sign right on the background where I like taking group shots, and all the time I have to erase it. I cannot really just take it off. I have to erase it all the time. So these little things here and there, outlets, cables at the reception, all of these things have to be retouched. And you will actually see this on the picture. Like I said previously, if you ask your photographer to share the entire gallery, take a look at these little things, like pay attention to this little things here and there. You will see that photographer took care of them or did not take care of them. But again, you want to hear something similar. I mean, we cannot really invent the bicycle over here. It's same for everyone. It's the same, absolutely the same process for everyone. And also you want to ask your photographer how long it's going to take to receive your photos. And usually the industry standard is about 8 weeks or so. This year I'm trying to do my best to deliver photos like under 3-4 weeks. That's my personal goal. If I say that I'm always deliver the pictures in 8 weeks, I would be lying personally. I had weddings where it took me like 10 weeks or so, but it never was more than that. With the album, it's a little bit harder. I'm talking here about the actual photo delivery here. With the album, it usually takes longer because the client needs to receive the picture, and I personally prefer when my clients choosing the picture that's gonna go to the album, so it's take them sometimes to pick these photos. Then I'm going to do the layout design, then we're going back and forward with corrections, with some adjustments of this layout design. Then they pick in the color of the book, then I print it, and then I send it to you. So that's going to take some time as well. Roughly about 40 days or so to produce the album. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes I had couples who didn't want to do the album for a year or so, and they came back for me after that. So it's really up to you how fast you want to get it. The reason why you're actually asking this question, because you want to avoid like super creative person who wants to take his time to edit each and every photo, and that's might take like 6-7 months or so. I heard these stories. You don't really want to do that, and it's not going to make your photos looks better as well. You want to receive your photos in a reasonable time. You want to receive them in 6-8 weeks. You also probably want to receive like 30-40 pictures a couple of days after the wedding, so you can share it with your friends and family. That's a very important part, and I do provide it in my packages. So you want to make sure, you want to be sure right over here, and you want to see these numbers in your agreement as well. Another common question that I got asked quite often is, can you get the raw footage? And I cannot answer for everyone over here. Some photographers and videographers would be against providing the raw footage to the client for some reason. I'm absolutely fine with this, and I'm trying to keep this process very simple. I'm just asking my client, just order the hard drive from Amazon, send it to my address, and I'm gonna send it back to you with the photos. No problem over here. At the same time, I want to share the experience of my clients over here, and with many of my clients, I became friends. We cycling together, we traveling together, so we keeping in touch for years and years after the weddings. And sometimes I'm asking them, like, have you done anything with this hard drive that I sent it to you? And they usually like, well, I opened this picture, it doesn't look very cool. Of course, they're not gonna look great because it's raw, unedited photos. And he just didn't have specific software to edit these photos, and this software is quite expensive actually. And also didn't have time to go through all these 7,000 pictures. So usually you don't really need this raw footage. The pictures that you got, this 1,000 pictures that you're going to get, that's the best of the best. That's everything that was captured on your wedding day. And the rest is just the shots that lead to these pictures. Let's say someone dancing, and I cannot just predict what's going to happen in the next millisecond. So I have to shoot like 10 frames to get this specific shots, and you need this specific shot. You don't need the 10 picture that followed this shot and the previous 10 shots. You don't really need it. You don't really want to go through all of them. So again, it's a great question to see the reaction of your photographer. Is he very flexible to give you this raw footage? But again, you do not really need it. Another question that you want to ask when you receive your photos, what is your copyright? How can you use this picture and the rest of the things? And not only you want to hear the answer, you want to read this answer in the agreement. That's a very important thing. For me personally, I think you paid for this picture and they are yours. Very rarely someone would want to use them for commercial advertising or something like that. And again, if you paid me for this picture and you happen to have travel and business and you want to use these pictures in your advertising, maybe I'm wrong, but I think you paid enough to do whatever you want with these pictures. Do you want to make a canvas? Go for it. Do you want to celebrate your university anniversary with printing the huge billboard on a highway? Go for it. It's all yours, and it's written in my contract as well. If I'm doing the commercial photo shoot for e-commerce or something like that, of course it's going to be a different story. But again, it's a different types of the photo shoot, and it's different types of rights over here. So you want to make sure that all this written in your contract, that you have the rights to do with your pictures whatever you want. And it's happened with us, with a photographer, especially at the very beginning when we afraid of being like underpaid for our pictures. And we think like somewhere on the wedding, we're going to make a shot that's going to be used in a huge advertising and we're not going to be paid for this advertising. And with the time, we do understand eventually that it's actually completely different types of the photo shoot. The one that done for the advertising made by the whole team, and they have the goal of taking this specific shot, and they spent like 10 hours for this specific shot with the models, with a bunch of makeup artists, and with the rest of the thing. That is not going to be possible in an environment of the real wedding to do this commercial photo shoot. But this commercial photo, but it take time to understand that. And while the photographer traveling through this story, he would try to keep his photographs as protected as possible. And you don't really want to be a victim of that. You don't want to find out a couple bad news after you start printing these pictures for yourself, and you will find out that it's not according to your contract. So make sure you ask him this question and make sure it's written in your agreement as well. Another thing that you want to ask is, how is your picture is going to be delivered to you? Is it going to be the flash drive? Is it going to be the online gallery or something like that? And usually the answer you want to get is the online gallery, because you can easily lose the USB drive, and you're probably not going to do the backup of it. It's just from my experience. So the best way is the online gallery. You're never going to lose it. You always can have this link. The service is not going to crash, and you probably know that because the picture that was uploaded to your iCloud or Google Photos stayed there forever. You actually might lose the picture that was on your personal hard drive. My personal gallery that is on a SmugMug, you can get it from my website. Prepaid until 2025, I think, or something like that. It's actually paid for itself because you can purchase photos and other things from this gallery, and this money goes back to the online gallery, so it's self-funded online gallery. But anyway, you want to make sure that you have access to your photos, and not only you, your family, your friends should have access to these photos, because it might be fun for the first 10 inquiries from your friends to share these pictures, but what if 100 people from your wedding going to ask for these pictures? You want to make sure that you just have this link on your Facebook page or somewhere there, and everyone who wants to have their photos, they can go to this online gallery and download these photos, not bothering you. What's going to happen if you have the flash drive? Well, you will have to search this specific face on your flash drive, send it via email. This photos is quite big, like 35 megabytes or something like that, because I'm using 40 megapixel camera, and it's not going to fit to the email. You have to send it to the Dropbox. You got an idea. You don't want to deal with that. You want to send the link from the online gallery. And do you need the flash drive? Honestly, not. Why do we still have them? That's sort of physical thing that is nice to hold, but no more than that. Do you care about the online gallery a lot? And also make sure that you're not paying anything additionally for that. You don't want to pay like every year for this. It should be prepaid for you. And finally, the conclusion. So you watch this bazillion minutes, you ask all of this question to your photographer or videographer, you get all these answers. And why do you actually do that? What do you want to find out? Well, the most important thing you want to find out is who is in front of you. What is the vision of this person? Is he after a couple of nice shots for his portfolio? Is he after money, or he is after satisfaction of the client? What is his prime vision? You cannot really chase everything. You have to have one single focus and you have to follow it. So you want to understand who is in front of you, where is your money goes, and what are you going to get at the end. And from my experience, by asking all of these questions or part of them, you don't have to ask all of them, you'll get your answer. You'll get very clear picture who is in front of you. So set up a meeting, grab a coffee. It's not going to take long. It's going to take 30-40 minutes of casual conversation. But at the end, you will have a solution to one of the most important tasks in a wedding planning: choosing your wedding photographer.